4 completely different VR games are landing on Quest 3 within the same short window this month, and that almost never happens. Normally, Quest releases trickle out one at a time, spaced weeks apart. But July 2026 is stacking a co-op dungeon crawler, a narrative escape room, a cozy building sim, and a long-delayed roguelite shooter into practically the same 7 days. That's 4 genres and 4 completely different moods, landing on the same headset in the same week. If you only have time to download one of them before your weekend, picking the wrong one means missing out on whichever mood you were actually in. So this video covers what each of these 4 games actually is, exactly when each one lands, and by the end, which one you should grab first based on what you're actually looking for right now. No filler and no ranking them worst to best. Just the 4 releases, the dates, and who each one is really built for. Because a stacked release week like this one is exactly when it's easiest to grab the wrong game and never open the other 3. First, One More Delve, which reached its full one release on July 13 for both PC VR and Quest 3 after a stretch in early access. It's a 3-player co-op dungeon crawler built around physics-based hack-and-slash combat, meaning your sword swings and shield blocks are governed by actual arm movement and momentum rather than a canned animation triggered by a button press. You and 2 other players drop into a dungeon together, fight through fantasy enemies, and come out the other side with loot and weapons to carry into the next run. The early access period wasn't just a marketing label here either. The jump to 1 came with real changes based on that testing window, which matters because plenty of VR co-op games launch straight into a full release and only find their actual balance problems after players are already frustrated with them. Physics-based combat also tends to get messier, not cleaner, with more players in the fight, since 3 people all swinging real arm motion at once creates a kind of chaos a scripted combat system never would. And for this specific game, that chaos is the appeal rather than a flaw to root around. Grabbing 2 friends for this one is going to make a much bigger difference than playing it solo. Second, Amelia's Escape, which is a completely different kind of game and launches July 23 on both Quest and Steam for $15.99. This is a narrative escape room title, meaning the core loop isn't combat at all, it's puzzles, and the puzzles exist to unravel the story of a time travel scientist piece by piece as you solve them. If the first game on this list is about fast reflexes and physics chaos, this one is the opposite. It wants you to slow down, read the room, and think through each puzzle before you touch anything. VR is genuinely good at this kind of game specifically because being physically present in a room full of clues hits differently than clicking through the same puzzle on a flat screen. And Amelia's Escape is built around that strength directly rather than trying to be an action game with puzzles bolted on. Escape room games also tend to hold up well with friends watching even if they're not playing, since watching someone else physically reach for the wrong object while wearing a headset is funnier in person than it sounds, which makes this a reasonable pick even if you were originally planning a solo session tonight. Third, Puzzles of the World, which moves out of free-to-play early access and into a full paid release on July 23, available on both Quest 3 and Quest 3. This is a cozy miniature building game set around real-world locations, with a relaxed pace that leans much more into model making than into any kind of action or time pressure. The move from a free early access title to a paid full release is worth paying attention to on its own, because it usually signals the developer has added enough new content and polish that they're confident charging for the finished product, rather than just flipping a price tag onto the same build overnight. If you've been playing the early access version already, the full release is the point where the promised content actually shows up. Cozy games have quietly become one of the fastest-growing categories on the Quest Store over the past couple of years, precisely because not every VR session needs to be about combat or adrenaline, and a slower, low-stakes building game gives the headset a reason to come out on a night when you don't want your heart rate up. If you haven't tried it at all, this full release is the natural entry point now that it's considered complete. Fourth, and this is the one with the most history behind it, Roboquest VR finally launches July 23 on Quest 3, after getting delayed out of its original May release date so the developers could keep polishing it. Roboquest VR is the VR adaptation of a roguelite first-person shooter, meaning every run reshuffles your weapons, upgrades, and layout, so no 2 playthroughs go quite the same way twice. A delay like this can read as bad news when you first see it announced, But it usually means the opposite. The team looked at where the game actually was in May, decided it wasn't ready, and chose to push the date rather than ship something rough and patch it later in public. Roguelite shooters live or die on whether a run that goes badly still feels like it taught you something useful for the next attempt. And that specific kind of balance work benefits far more from extra development time than from hitting a hard launch deadline on schedule. For a genre where run-to-run balance is basically the entire experience, those extra 2.5 months of polish time matter more here than they would in a lot of other games. If you've been waiting on this one specifically, July 23 is finally the date. So out of all 4, which one should you actually download first? If you want fast, physical, sweat-inducing action, Roboquest VR and One More Delve are your 2 picks. And honestly, if you've got 2 friends free, One More Delve edges it out just because co-op chaos with real people beats solo runs most weeks. If you'd rather ease into your week instead, Amelia's Escape and Puzzles of the World are the better calls. And between those 2, it comes down to whether you want a story pulling you forward, which is Amelia's Escape at $15.99, or a slower, goal-free kind of relaxation, which is what Puzzles of the World is built for. There's no wrong answer here. Genuinely, these 4 barely overlap with each other, which is exactly why this was worth covering as one video instead of 4 separate reviews. If you're only buying one this month because of budget, price is worth factoring in too, since Amelia's Escape is the only one of the 4 with a confirmed price point as of this video. So check the store listing for the other 3 before you commit to one. To recap, One More Delve hit its full one release on July 13 for 3-player co-op dungeon crawling. Amelia's Escape launches July 23 for $15.99 as a story-driven escape room. Puzzles of the World moves to a full paid release that same day for cozy building. And Roboquest VR finally lands July 23 too after its delay from May. 4 games, one very packed week for Quest 3. Tomorrow's video breaks down the Quest 3 accessories that are actually worth buying in 2026, and the ones that aren't worth your money, so if you're building out your setup, that one's for you. Subscribe if this saved you some scrolling through the store today. Here's the question for the comments. Out of these 4, which one are you actually downloading first?